Hello and you're welcome to Business Highlights on Trust TV. On the show, we take you through some of the biggest business developments of the week, and we also analyze major economic policies and how they affect the average Nigerian out there. My name is Chamunda Beng. I'll be your host. Let's talk numbers. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, and we're focusing on the economy. And we'll get to that right after the break. Don't go anywhere. You're welcome back to Business Highlights. My name is Chamunda Beng, and as I said earlier, we're going to be focusing on Nigeria's economy under the President Buhari's administration. Now, it's just a few hours until the official inauguration, and Nigeria is going to be welcoming a new president, that's the president-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And because of that, we're going to be taking a look at what has been happening in Nigeria's economic space over the last 8 years. Now, joining me in the studio today is Dr. Aliyu Iliya, and he is a financial analyst. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we've previously heard President Buhari say these words, that he will be leaving Nigeria's economy better than how he actually found it. And we're going to be taking a look at some numbers to see if that is true or not. And let's start off with GDP from 2015 to 2023. If we could actually get that. Thank you very much. All right, so you can see that in 2014, Nigeria's GDP was at $546.7 billion. But today, the last figures that we have anyway says $436.29 billion. And let's move on to Nigeria's public debt. Let's take a look at that. Yes, in 2015, it was 12.6 trillion naira, and we rounded that up with 77, actually, we'll make that correction. In 2023, 77 trillion naira in debt. Now, let's look at inflation. Now, the consumer price index for 2015 down to 2023, we started off in 2015 at 9.6, moving on to 22.22%. And that's where we are today. That is the latest figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics. And let's look at unemployment figures out there. Now, we have 10.4% in 2015, and today we're looking at potentially 40.6%, though the official figures say 33.3%. We're still waiting for the National Bureau of Statistics to release those figures, but KPMG has actually projected that Nigeria will have 40.6. You also have NESG's projections that are stating about 37%. We'll find out where our analyst in the studio is leaning towards when it comes to those figures. But looking at these numbers, Dr. Aliyu, what do you make of them?
Well, it's quite very, very interesting to see this. No, it's always good to have such records so that we can really refer back to where we are coming and where we are today. But for Nigeria economy, it's in a bad shape, quite bad shape. Because if you look at the GDP would have been at least better compared. We could say inflation is a general problem. But for GDP, it shows that Nigeria did not do more. The federal government can have a defense for it. They could say COVID-19 does not help the GDP, the recession does not help the GDP. But the fact is that it would have been better because insecurity is also a part of it. But generally, we did not do well in terms of gross domestic product at all. It's a very bad indication. It also reflects that there was no foreign direct investment during this period. It also shows that the employment itself is dwindling because if there is more employment, the GDP would have been also more than this. The only thing that we can say it's a general problem could be inflation, because you cannot expect the inflation to still remain at 9%, but not at this double digit we are experiencing now. So I think it's quite it's very,
like
very
every
high.
Single month we surpass the all-time high.
So generally, we do
high.
not have a good economic team, and it has reflected in all these figures. Because if you have good economic team, they would have find way of bringing controlling all this, because if you also look at the unemployment there, it's quite appalling that since that period there's no significant increment in the unemployment efforts to make sure Nigerians get employed. And that's why we are saying that there must be a deliberate creation of economic activities that will engender employment opportunity for Nigerians. So it's a very it's an omnibus challenge that I don't know how we can really decipher or explain it better. But I can tell you that it reflects that our economic policy is not that very good. It shows that our monetary policy does not really come out well. It also reflects that our fiscal policy does not reflect well. In fact, our international trade policy also is also not well handled, because you cannot at this point in time, Nigeria with this level of population, level of resources, we cannot tap into international advantage to benefit Nigeria. It's quite sad. I think going forward we need to look at what actually went wrong, and looking at what went wrong
but before we get into that and focus on the mistakes that could have possibly or were made during this administration, I would like to ask you this. Now, a couple of experts have said, or have the opinion that President Buhari came into power on a very slippery slope. At that point, Nigeria's economy was already beginning to to struggle. We had heightened insecurity, and I would like to know where your sentiments on this issue falls.
Well, first and foremost, President Muhammadu Buhari came with a lot of baggage. And one of the baggage is his body language, because I could say he also contributes to the problem. Emile is coming. I can tell you that most international organizations decided leaving Nigeria because they think it's going to be very, very hard. And it also reflects towards, even at this point in time, we could see that it does not handle the economy very well. You remember, people are keeping money in septic tank, and he also came in 6 months. He did not have cabinet, and that could have resulted to the inflation that we experience. I mean, to the recession that came in. Because if you don't have cabinet, that means there are some economic activities that cannot work. The permanent secretary cannot just come and sign into it. So for me, I share the sentiment that his economic policy was so bad that he could not even manage those economic policy, because he would have used his power. You remember, during Obasanjo traveled far and wide, and when he traveled far and wide, he was able to attract a lot of investment. He was also able to look into different agencies that will bring solution. He was able to look into Bureau of Public Procurement, Bureau of Public Enterprise, NHIS, EFCC, ICPC. But this government, you cannot even say these are what they have make actual difference. So it affects a lot of economic activities that would have, because people need to have trust in the government before they can come in to put in their investment.
Now, you said earlier on that immediately President Buhari came in, a lot of international bodies started to actually leave. Do you think that this has something to do with some of the policies that were created around the business space?
It's actually from what people have experienced when he was president, head of state. People carried that baggage up to when he was becoming president. And when he became president, he is expected to have shown that, yes, economic and democracy give room for more investment. But he never shows that area. And that's why I made mention of he never have a substantive ministers, cabinet that will engender. You cannot, as a president and permanent secretary, you cannot do all those things all alone, because your ministers will go out to engage, to create, to make sure things come out well. So his body language for the first 1 year does not really help economic development, and it's have a negative effect on the Nigeria. And in terms of insecurity also, you must demonstrate that you are creating a safe haven for investors to come in.
All right, so I want to talk about some of the interventions that this administration had actually, created. There are quite a few social intervention programs, strategic, intervention programs out there. How well would you say these programs have actually fared in helping the lives of Nigerians? Many of them were targeted at saving the vulnerable Nigerians out there, lifting people out of poverty. One of them was the Anchors Borrowers program out there, which was targeted at creating employment, which was one of them. How well would you say?
Well, the fact remains that successive government always have poverty reduction program, and Muhammad Buhari also have National Social Investment Program (NSIP) that have a JIP government-owned enterprise that conditional cash transfer, homegrown school feeding, and N-Power, including Anchor. But if you ask me, poverty has been deepening the more in Nigeria because you are looking at surface. You're looking at surface. You're not looking at the major issues. Enabling environment creates job and opportunity for people. But if you are creating poverty reduction program, does not really have human face, because you know why? Our poverty reduction program is top to bottom instead of bottom to top approach, because people really know what they need. You are giving people cash transfer. As an economist, we negate any expenditure that will be consumption in nature, right? We believe in productivity. Now, if you have used this money to create an enterprise or to even create an investment opportunity, you would have by now, we have a ripple or multiplier effect. But all these things are focused. Apart from that, too, the social intervention is not well structured. Every local government have peculiar challenges, and you're using one size fits all for all the local governments in Nigeria. Some local governments need for you to just empower them to grow their maize. Some need for you to just empower them to grow their groundnut. It's a different thing, not all size fits all. The only thing we can celebrate or appreciate Muhammad Buhari is that he tried to institutionalize a poverty reduction program by having Federal Ministry of what do we call it, disaster management, humanitarian disaster management, so that if other administration that is coming, they will now find way of using this institutionalized area. But for me, poverty has grew beyond expected. You could see the last report from NBS of multidimensional poverty. 133 million Nigeria are in multidimensional. It's quite a bad one. And even now that we are going out of President Muhammad Buhari, we cannot be proud that subsidy has been removed. We cannot be proud that as at now we have sufficient energy. We cannot be proud as at now that security has now restored. So what is the legacy? What is the actual thing that we are going with? I only think the incoming government is coming to inherit the problem. The only thing is that we have seen the worst in Nigeria. So going forward, if this incoming administration can look deep, it will find a better way to handle Nigeria, because we have seen the worst in terms of economy. All
right, so looking at this in a general sense, really, how well would you say that the administration in itself performed? Because you do have to take a look at some highs and lows. Are there places where you feel like this administration actually succeeded?
Well, if you ask me, I would say the administration has succeeded in terms of bill passage. Because if you look at bill, we have PI, Petroleum Industry Act. It was able to scale through. Electoral Act was able to scale through. And President Muhammad Buhari make effort in two things. He signed executive order for local government autonomy, but they never honor it. He's also signed executive order for independence of the judiciary. They did not also honor that. So these are the things that he has actually done very well. Apart from that, also in terms of infrastructure, for me, I want to score him very, very high. You know why? Most successive governments, once their predecessor starts a project, they don't always complete. But Muhammad Buhari makes sure he completed most of President Jonathan projects.
Even projects that exactly like
so that's what I'm saying. So even Jonathan could not complete most of projects of President Muhammad Yar'Adua that they even come from the same political party. But Muhammad Buhari has shown that government is a continuum that everybody must come and complete what is ongoing. I think for that we score. Then for infrastructure, stomach infrastructure is much more serious compared to physical infrastructure. He has done
something that we didn't even touch on.
Yes,
food inflation.
Food inflation
is quite high.
It's in fact, every inflation in Nigeria since Buhari came in is food cost inflation. It's cost push inflation that reflected that for us to even eat, it's becoming a problem. So it's now erode the purchasing power of common Nigerian, and that's a big issue that incoming government must look into, because you know why? There's serious hunger in the land. So for you to have a short-term plan is for you to make sure that at least agriculture is being robust enough as expected, and people go back to farm. And to go back to farm, the precursor is for people to have adequate security. And also there should be much more subsidy in that area too. You must encourage people to go to farm. a mechanized farming. A country like Ethiopia does not have much business apart from the airline. It is agriculture. We don't have, federal government should make sure they have one cargo airport by themselves, because it's too big a project for a state to embark on. It's only federal government that can have a cargo whereby man in Sokoto will now get his tomato, his onions, get it to America in 24 hours without it getting rotten. And that's a solution for Nigeria to move forward in terms of economy.
All right, so we only have a few minutes left to go. I just want to quickly touch on some of the economic policies that were actually enacted during the President Buhari administration. We have quite a few, but I'm just going to name a few examples, and you can, speak to what you want to. So we have, of course, the Naira redesign policy. We have the border closure, Anchors Borrowers programs, of course, just to name just a few. How well would you say that these have performed in helping Nigeria?
I was thinking you even mentioned ease of doing business, which affect a whole lot of things. Ease of doing business has actually done very well, because in terms of bureaucratic bottleneck of working on paper documents to really do business in Nigeria, they have really worked on it, but they need to work more on supply chain, maybe for the incoming administration. Naira design was not well conceptualized, and if you could see, how many new Naira do you see in the public? Nigerians, how many new Naira do you see in the public? We are still seeing the old. So it reflects how bad that policy was. Anchor Borrower, a very good policy, but it has been eroded by insecurity. So these are the challenges that income administration need to look at. If you are looking at a policy, look at human development policy that could be sustained. You will notice that most of their policy may not be sustained. The only one that can be sustained is the ministry that was engendered to really handle poverty reduction. Because if you remember, the NSIP was domiciled. It was on its own before, but now it is now under Ministry of Humanitarian and Disaster Management. So I think, for me, incoming government should look at their downfall and move ahead to solve a major economic problem. Nigeria deserves a better life.
All right, so real quick, we have about 3 minutes left to go. Let's take a look at the incoming administration, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration that we're going to be welcoming in the next 2 days. What do they need to do to set the pace for economic growth in Nigeria?
Right. Number one thing that the incoming administration needs to do, we need to work on our trade policy. Our trade policy, even the AFCTA, need to be reviewed holistically. So if we work our trade policy, because we are Nigeria have the population, have what solid mineral is everywhere, so we should be able to export and take advantage of international trade, and that could be achieved by true trade policy. Then our monetary policy needs to be reviewed. The last time, is it the day before yesterday, we saw that they still increased the NPR from 18% to 18.5. That is not manufacturing friendly. It doesn't encourage investment into the. Then thirdly, our fiscal policy needs to be looked at, and I want, if there could be a little marriage between monetary policy and our fiscal policy, they need to have a synergy to make sure Nigeria move out of this poverty. 1.3 million Nigeria in poverty, that is too high. There must be urgent economic solution, and the only solution is for Bola Ahmed Tinubu to have right economic team. The Minister of Finance must understand the economy very well. The people that will be manning all this CBN and what have you, they must understand economic policy as it relates to Nigeria. Right, they must not do copy and paste economic policy. It must be thorough economic policy that will see to poverty reduction in Nigeria.
All right, so if you can just answer this last question within a minute. Now, what checks and balances need to be put in place to sort of protect the economy? Now, this isn't just about raising it up. So far, we've seen a lot of ordeals that we didn't really plan for, like the COVID-19 pandemic. You have the Russia-Ukraine war. How do you create buffers to stop the country from being hit as hard as we were actually hit?
Why force majeure is not what, act of God is not what you can really plan for. It can happen anytime. The only thing that our sovereign wealth fund, should be increased. We should do more in savings as a country, so that when there is a problem, we can easily go there to get from it. You must have shock absorber. If you don't have shock absorber, you are going to be falling prey to every word problem.
All right, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time and we have come to the end of our show for today. I'd like to thank my guests in the studio. Thank you so much, Dr. Aliyu, for being a part of the show. And to our viewers out there, thank you so much for watching. Please do follow us on our social media platforms. Remember to like and subscribe. Well, my name is Chamunda Beng. Come back again. Let's talk numbers.